Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farrah, and today we're going to talk about all the books that I read during the month of July. Fun fact, I'm actually filming this in September. I am really far behind. I even questioned whether I was going to make this video, but I figured why not? Better late than never, right? But I may struggle a little bit to remember these books as it's been a little while since I read them. So I was able to read complete four different books during the month of July. I am finding that the summer I tend to read a little bit less because I'm outside doing more. So unfortunately I only got through 4 books this month. I did 2 books on audio, 1 ebook, and 1 physical book. So the first book I wanted to talk to you guys about was a book I listened to on audio called Gallant by v.e.schwab. And I chose this because it was listed on the Goodreads Book of the Year #1 pick for the YA fantasy category. So I've read one other v.e. Schwab book before called City of Ghosts, which was really cute. I enjoyed that, so I thought I'd give this one a try. So the premise of this book is that we're following this young girl. She's probably maybe 14, 15 years old, named Olivia. She's an orphan and she grows up at a boarding school called Maryland, and the setting takes place in England. The point of view is just told by Olivia. Actually, there's a few points of views told by our villain, which shows up later, but the main perspective is from Olivia, and it's told in the third person point of view. So we're following Olivia. She's a little bit of an outcast. I definitely visualize her as Wednesday Addams. It's I think the genre type is kind of like gothic fantasy YA. So it has a very spooky gothic tone to it. It's very... I just pictured it all in grayscale a lot. So we're following Olivia, and she's at the boarding school. She has a very hard time fitting in with the other girls there. Interestingly enough, she is mute, so she can't speak, but she can hear everything, and she communicates with sign language. We don't really find out, I don't think, if she was born that way or if there was a reason why she doesn't speak, but regardless, she's a nonverbal main character, which is really interesting. So one day Olivia gets a letter telling her to come home to Gallant. It's signed, I think, by her aunt and uncle. Gallant is a place that her mother grew up in. And Olivia has this journal that she keeps with her, which is her only memory of her mother. And as she reads through the journal, as she's read through the journal the whole time she's growing up, her mom talks about the family home called Gallant, but as the pages come to an end, the mom's mental health starts to unwind a little bit, and by the end of the journal, the mother warns her never to return to Gallant. She says, "You're going to be safe as long as you never come back here." So despite this warning that Olivia has in the journal, she still decides to go home because she's so lonely and she really wants to see and meet her family and to kind of just be done with this boarding school chapter of her life. So she ends up at the door for Gallant, and she's greeted with surprise because the people that live and work there, nobody had expected her and nobody can admit to writing the letter. Despite that, they take her in and tell her she can stay. They loved and knew her mother, so the older people that work in the household are really excited to meet her and know her and are very kind to her. She meets her cousin Matthew, who is very rude, very mean, very cold to her. We don't really know why. He wants her out of there, and she's just confused as to why that could be. So I think I like the book okay. A note about the audio is that it was read by Julian. I think his name is Julian Rhett Tudd or something like that. Phenomenal job. Really great audio reader. He had a beautiful British accent. He acted it out really well. So I really enjoyed the audio for that reason. But I think overall the story was a bit slow for me. We don't really get introduced into major conflict until at least over 60% of the book. So the beginning was a bit slow. It is a beautiful world that she built within the descriptions, and the writing's really, really nice. But I just think the overall story and the way it was laid out, or maybe the pacing of the book, wasn't really the best. It didn't, it was interesting enough, but I didn't feel as though there was a lot of character growth within the book. I thought that these spooky elements were done pretty well. There was a little bit of foreshadowing. We get like a couple snippets of the villain's perspective and what he wants to do, and it's very creepy and mysterious. So that was really good. I think overall, obviously, a lot of people really like this book. It was voted #1, so maybe I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion. But if you like reading YA fantasy and you're a fan of v.e. Schwab and you're looking for something to read during spooky season coming up, then you might really like this book. So I probably gave it around a 3. Mainly, I liked it because I thought the audio was really good. So that was Gallant. So the next book I wanted to tell you guys about really quickly, this is a nonfiction pick that I read called Shoulder Pain, The Solution and Prevention, the exercise that helps relieve shoulder pain and back pain. So I ended up getting this book because over the past few years, I've been having some issues with my shoulder, both shoulders, but mainly my left shoulder. And for a while, I thought maybe I had some kind of rotator cuff injury. It seemed like I would get these flare-ups of pain every few months, and anytime I tried to restart exercising, it would flare up and I would just be miserable for like a week until the pain subsided. And I was having pain like with just range of motion a lot, going around, going behind my head. So I thought I had a shoulder rotator cuff injury or some kind of impingement within the nerves. So I found this book. I actually follow Bob and Brad, who are physical therapists on YouTube, and they recommended this book and this exercise. So I looked up the reviews on Amazon and it was like 5 stars. People were just raving about this book. It's really short as well. So I thought I'd pick it up. And I have to tell you, I started doing the exercises in this book. And again, spoiler alert, it's September now. So I read this back in July. And I would have to say that my overall shoulder pain has pretty much improved by at least 80% just from 3 months of doing the exercises in this book and following, his recommended treatment. So absolutely phenomenal. As far as the writing goes, this was written by an orthopedic surgeon, so not written by, an author or a professional writer. So of course the writing is a little bit, it's not the best, but it's very easy to read. He goes into depth about the most common shoulder issues, why they occur, and he talks about how he had a discovery of this new joint within the shoulder called the subarachnoid humeral joint, which basically what happens over time as you age is that the joints in your shoulder kind of shrink and this space between the ligaments can get smaller and smaller. So over time and over wear and tear, all the ligaments within this joint space start to get pinched and crowded out. So a lot of people complain about this pinching sensation and this pain within their shoulder joint, and that's I think what I have. So he recommends this one exercise where you hang from like a pull-up bar or any kind of bar. You hang with your total body weight. Well, you lead up to it. You can't. Some people can't hang. I couldn't hang with my full body weight at first, but I had to lead up to it. And what it does is over time, it stretches that space back out again, and it gives room to all those joints and ligaments, so there's no friction. Obviously, if you have like a dislocated shoulder or severe shoulder injuries, go to your doctor. Definitely get an MRI or a CAT scan or anything else. Mine wasn't severe enough where I felt like I needed to do those steps. I wanted to try as much conservative treatment as I could. And just by doing that, every day to every other day, I have found a huge improvement in my shoulders. I can't even believe it. I'm so happy. It's been years since I've been able to like rotate my shoulders without pain. And it's a really interesting premise behind it because as human beings, we do have this ability to brachiate, which otherwise means hang. We have opposable thumbs and we have this ability to hang from our arms. And as kids, you do it all the time when you're playing, even as infants and babies, you're hanging onto your parents. You have this shoulder mobility and rotation. And a lot of times as you get older, you don't do that anymore. You don't do these hanging exercises, so the joints and everything gets really deformed and shrunk. But this is a way to improve that part of your mobility. So highly recommend this book if you are having any sort of shoulder pain. He recommends it for rotator cuff injuries, for subacromial impingement syndrome, I think that's the correct word for it, and frozen shoulder. Now, I will say one disclaimer. Obviously, it might hurt when you do it at first. It hurt for me when I did it at first, and I kind of went overboard with it. So start out slow. Just do a little bit of hanging that you can a day, and then each day you'll improve. And I've also found that I've gotten so much stronger within my shoulders and even within these muscles along the sides of my back just by doing this simple exercise for like 5 to 10 minutes a day. So highly recommend this book. Again, Shoulder Pain by Dr. John Kirsch. So amazing. I feel like it has really improved just my quality of life with my shoulder. So 5 stars because it works. The next book was my second audiobook of the month. This was called I'm Glad My Mom Died, which is a celebrity memoir written by Jennette McCurdy. So I did a whole separate review on my channel, which I just posted. So I'll leave a link to that up here or down below if you're interested or you want to read that book or you have read that book and you're just curious about my thoughts. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. But this was a phenomenal, phenomenal read for me as well. I gave this 5 stars. This is one of my favorite memoirs I've ever listened to. So again, I listened to the audio. It is narrated by the author herself. And I think just a few quick points. What I really, really liked about this memoir was that I went into this book not really knowing at all who this actress was. I've never heard of her before, and I didn't watch the shows from the show she was on, iCarly, which aired on Nickelodeon back in the early 2000s. I wasn't familiar with that show. I didn't know anything about her. So the fact that so many of us who don't know this actress are raving about this book is another testament to how well it was written and the actual content within the memoir. So she basically chronicles her life starting from when she's really young up until present day, and I think she's in her late 20s. She might even be 30 by now. And she talks about what it was like growing up with her narcissistic mother and joining into the acting community as a young child. She started acting really early in life, maybe even before the age of 10. And her mother, I mean, as you can tell from the book, it was a very horrible, toxic relationship she had with her mother. And the book focuses a lot on what she went through and how her mother groomed her into being a child actor and was trying to live vicariously through her. Her mother pushed anorexia on her at a very young age and calorie counting. There was some abuse within the book, both sexual and emotional. So there's a lot of content warnings within that. If that's not your cup of tea, this is going to be a very difficult book to read. It already was hard to read. But what I loved about it was that she put so much humor within this book. It was such a perfect balance for me of humor and sensitivity, talking about what she went through. And one thing that really broke my heart, which I didn't mention in my review, but I thought about later, was that despite everything that her mother was doing and what Jennette was going through, she loved her mother so much. It was that unconditional love that a child has for her mother and their want to please them and to try to do everything they can to make their mother happy. And it's just heartbreaking because as an adult reader, as you're going through this book, you see all these red flags and these things that should not be happening. And this poor child who was so innocent and so sweet and all she wanted to do was please her mother just went along with it. It wasn't until later on, way later on, until she started to get professional help that she realized, whoa, this wasn't how I was supposed to be treated. This wasn't how I was supposed to grow up. And there is one part in the audio where she's speaking with the therapist and you hear her voice change and you find that moment that she realizes that all this time she was being severely abused. And that made me cry. It was just such a great memoir. It was such a good book about hope and overcoming really difficult situations and wanting to share that experience with others and give people a voice that may not have ever been able to read a book that really goes that in depth about this toxic relationship between a daughter and her mother or a parent with their child, that kind of thing. So 5 stars. I really loved it. It's very popular and it's definitely worth all the hype that it received. Okay, so my final book I wanted to tell you guys about was my favorite book of the month of July. And this was called Primitives by Erick Krauss. And this is a sci-fi novel set in a post-apocalyptic type of environment. So we're following 2 different characters named Seth and Sarah, and the chapters alternate between both Seth and Sarah, and it's told in the first-person points of view. So we're getting first-person points of view for Sarah's chapters, and we're getting first-person points of views for Seth's chapters. And it's all a timeline that's moving forward, but we're getting some flashbacks into the past as well. So I did talk quite a bit about this in my previous vlogs, which I'll also link below, my reading vlogs when I was reading this. And basically, I thought that the writing was really, really good. I thought it had a really excellent balance between characterization and really fleshing out characters so that you really care about them, as well as a wonderfully, perfectly moving, fast-paced plot that really just kept me engaged and kept me wanting to read more and more and more. I really absolutely love this book. So we're following Seth and Sarah, and both of them are living in the present day. 30 years prior, there was this horrible virus that came over the world. It was an airborne virus that created this great fatigue syndrome, which I guess they called it. And what it did was that it just caused people to have extreme fatigue. Think Lyme disease, bedridden, you can't do anything, you can't function anymore. Just a very debilitating, horrible virus that spread quickly across the world, causing panic and mayhem and everything like that. So there was a vaccine that was created called Advidalon, which was distributed throughout the public, which cured the virus and everybody was able to get back to normal life. About 18 months after people started taking the vaccine, this horrible side effect popped up where it basically changed the chemistry of people's brains and regressed them back into a very, very primitive state of being. It made people very unaware. It made people violent. It made people unable to have relationships. It made people unable to care for themselves. It just brought them back down to this extremely primitive state of mind. So most of the population, the majority of the population, turned into these primitive humans again. So it's 30 years later, and we're following Seth, who is a young guy. He's probably in his early 20s. He was born from parents who didn't take the vaccine, so they were okay. So he didn't have the effects of the vaccine. The effects of the vaccine, I forgot to mention, also carries through genetically. So people that took the vaccine, it went through placentas and it affected the children, and it reproductively carried through down the line. So the primitive people were breeding with each other and creating more primitive children. So kind of a really bad situation. So we're following Seth, and he lives with his adopted father, who is known as the professor, and they live in this remote area in the Utah desert by themselves. They don't know if there's any other normal humans around, but there are scattered tribes of these primitive people within that area. So Seth goes out every few days, and captures one of these tribal primitive people, brings it back for his scientist adopted father to do experiments on, because he's trying to create a cure to help save the human race. So we're also following Sarah, who lives in a small community in Costa Rica with a non-vaccinated community as well, that were spared the effects of this virus. And it's a very dystopian world, similar to Hunger Games, where everybody is categorized in these little niches. They all have specific jobs. It's run by this handful of authoritative people. They have arranged marriages. So Sarah's also in her young 20s. She lost her parents. She's kind of a loner. She's a forager, so she goes out into the jungle to collect plants for medicinal purposes and experiments. And she just wants to get out of there. She doesn't like the community that she's in. She's stifled. So if you didn't take the vaccine, you still have these effects of this great fatigue that was the original virus that affected everyone. So they created these infusions called NDE, which once infused into your body, it would give you energy again and you'd be good to go. So you have to make sure you're getting infusions every few days so you can function. So Sarah, her really early on, we find that she's trying to sneak into this laboratory to break in and steal cases of this infusion so that she can run away. And she wants to just explore. She wants to see if there's other humans around, that kind of thing. So to make a long story short, their journeys, they go on 2 different journeys to, I don't want to give any spoilers, but they go on 2 different journeys. They come across these primitive people out in the wild, and then we start to see maybe there is some humanness left within this race. We find out some huge secrets are uncovered with why the fatigue happened in the first place. What is maybe the overall motivation behind the original vaccine? And we start to see some villains come out, and it's so good. And I know that a few people were mentioning that it kind of can be triggering, or it can be like an anti-vaxxer type of thing. But I didn't personally feel that within the book. It was more focused on the characters and the story rather than like the implications of taking a vaccine or not taking a vaccine. So with COVID, obviously, there's a weird parallel that it was written kind of during that time. So what I loved also about this book is that the author himself is a world traveler. He lived in all these specific areas that the book takes place in. He has lived with different tribes before. He taught survivor skills, and he contracted Lyme disease one day, just out and about from a random tick. It affected him so badly that he was completely bedbound. He lost all of his physical life, and he decided to write the book as a way to bring some joy and creativity back into his world. So doing his research with the medications that they can use to treat long COVID, they found some success within those medications that actually worked for long-term Lyme disease people. So he was able to take these simple medications and get his physical life back. And just absolutely inspiring story. And he donates all the proceeds that he gets from book sales back into the research that goes into the COVID and Lyme disease treatment. So just phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. It was a nominee on the Goodreads Book of the Year for science fiction. So that's how I found out about it. But really phenomenal book. I highly recommend it if you're interested in that type of story. So that wraps it up for me for this monthly wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would love to know what your favorite books have been that you've read recently. Thank you guys so much for all of your wonderful comments and motivation. And I just want to give a special shout out to one commenter, one viewer that comments on all of my videos with the sweetest, most kind comments. I'm probably going to say your name wrong, but I think it's Jorgwald. I'm not sure, but you just leave me the sweetest, kindest messages, and it just really is uplifting, and I really appreciate it. And anyone that has subscribed recently or given me encouragement, I really appreciate it, you guys. It's helping me to keep posting videos and to try to get more involved in the booktuber community, maybe participate in more tags. And yeah, so thank you. This has been a really fun time with the channel so far, so looking forward to doing more videos. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon.